My name's Rita, and I was 18 when it all started. Every morning, my parents made sure to check my bike before I left. It's for your safety, they'd say. But the crashes didn't stop until the day I caught my dad's hands where they shouldn't have been. I didn't scream. I didn't confront. I acted. 5 hours later, the police were knocking at our door. If you've ever felt betrayed by the very people who should have protected you, you'll understand. That day, I stumbled home shaking, like someone had wrung me out in a washing machine. My palms were scraped raw, my jeans torn at the knee, and there was a black streak of grease running up my arm, like I'd been arm wrestling an engine. Maybe I would have laughed at the mess if my heart wasn't still pounding back at that roundabout, where a truck nearly erased me from the road. I slammed the door behind me and collapsed. I fell again, I muttered. Mom spun from the sink with that polite, plastered smile she saves for guests. Dad barely shifted his eyes above the newspaper, yes, the actual paper, as though it's still the 90s. You fell? Mom asked, her grin flickering. But are you hurt? Broken bones? Her gaze swept over me like a butcher scanning cuts of meat. Not love, just inventory. I'm fine, I rasped. My voice sounded like a dying accordion. Brakes didn't catch. Almost went under a truck. You'd think that would spark panic. A gasp, a hug, something. Instead, Dad folded his paper with origami precision and asked, "Did you report it?" Not are you okay? Not sit down. Just report it. No, I said, rubbing my arms. Why would I? I'm not hurt. These things matter, he replied flatly. Did anyone at work log it? I stared. No, Dad. No one logged my almost death. Mom slid a glass of water in front of me like she was placing a stage prop. Sometimes the pain shows later, she murmured. Your wrist? Your back? Think carefully. I flexed my fingers. It hurt, like stubbing your toe hurts. Annoying, but not hospital-worthy. I was alive. Lucky. For now. They exchanged a look. Not relief. Not thank God she's okay. No, disappointment. Dad cleared his throat. Well, sometimes reporting helps. Remember that courier in the next town? Broke his arm on the job, got 6 figures in compensation. Mom chuckled like it was a party story. Imagine being that lucky. Lucky. Yeah. Nearly becoming roadkill sure makes me feel blessed. I forced a smile that probably looked more like a cramp. Crazy, I muttered. But inside? My stomach flipped. Because that morning, before my shift, I'd seen Dad crouched by my bike. Brakes felt spongy, he'd said, grease staining his nails. Always tinkering, always fixing. Things usually broke after his touch. Now, the memory replayed in my head like grainy CCTV, his fingers tugging the brake cable. Click. Tug. Done. One close call away from being a headline. Show me your knees, Mom said suddenly. I pulled up my shorts. She clucked, sympathy rehearsed. Oh, poor thing. That looks awful. It's nothing, I said. But there was a truck. Don't exaggerate, Dad cut in with that mocking chuckle people use to shrink your fear. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. My jeans were ripped, my heart still racing out of rhythm, but sure. Nothing. I checked the bike this morning, Dad insisted. Company bikes aren't maintained properly. I'm just keeping you safe. Safe. Right. I bit my tongue. I'm showering, I said. Don't get the bruises wet, Mom called after me, which, newsflash, isn't how water works. When I came back down, the house was silent except for the TV. Mom slid a plate toward me. Eat. You'll feel better. What if I don't? The words slipped out before I could stop them. She blinked like I'd just spoken Greek. Dad's jaw tightened, fork clinking against his plate. "Tomorrow," he said evenly, "I'll take another look. Maybe swap the cable. You already looked this morning. It needs another check." "Maybe the company should check," I shot back. That look passed between them again. A flicker. A warning. Mom's smile sharpened. "We don't need to cause trouble. You said yourself, you're fine." Fine. My new least favorite word. I excused myself and headed upstairs. My bike leaned against the radiator like it was listening in. Innocent, until it wasn't. I lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling crack shaped like a river, hands still trembling. Maybe it was bad luck. Maybe I was imagining things. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. And soon, I was going to see proof that would change everything. To understand why my parents seemed disappointed that night when I said I'd fallen, you need to know the way things worked in our house. Spoiler, they didn't. At least not for me. I was always the responsible one. Which is just a nice way of saying the kid who gets told no while her sibling gets showered with special and talented and so full of potential. My older sister got violin lessons, new clothes, applause for her grades. I got hand-me-downs and a perfunctory pat on the head. When she aced her exams, there was clapping. Sometimes literal clapping. When I did. Of course you did. You're reliable. Try feeling proud of yourself when you're treated like part of the furniture. Fast forward. My sister graduates college, cue marching band. My parents beam like she'd solved world hunger. I clapped too, because clapping for her was easier than realizing I was already fading into wallpaper. Then came her bombshell. Dinner table, roast chicken, regular night, until she cleared her throat. "So, I'm pregnant. You'd expect panic, right?" "Nope." Mom dropped her fork and practically glowed. Dad leaned back like this was the best plot twist of his life. By dessert, they were already planning her wedding, her house, her future. Meanwhile, I was stuck thinking, did she just say she's having a baby? They treated it like a miracle. I just realized my voice no longer mattered. Her boyfriend, let's call him Mr. Broke, wasn't exactly a dream catch. Still studying, broke as a paperclip. But my parents didn't care. They promised to bankroll everything. Wedding, house, happily ever after. Meanwhile, I'd just been accepted into college. For a second, I thought maybe my letter would bring my own parade. Instead of celebrating my acceptance letter, my parents sat me down with those heavy, serious faces, the kind that never mean good news. Dad cleared his throat like he was about to deliver a sermon. "We can't afford both," he said. And then Mom layered on the guilt, "College will wait, sweetheart. A baby can't." Guess who had to wait? Convinced is too polite. What they really said was, if you don't defer, you're on your own. And what 17-year-old has the money to bankroll college alone? Not me. So I wrote the university, told them I'd start next year, and tried to ignore the hollow ache in my chest. I told myself it was temporary. A gap year. People do that all the time, right? Except my real-life experience wasn't traveling or self-discovery. It was pedaling around town in a sweat-stained uniform, delivering packages on a company bike with brakes that squealed like dying mice. My paycheck barely touched my hands, straight into the family fund, rent, savings, house deposit, wedding costs. My sister didn't contribute a cent. She didn't need to. She was the golden child. Golden children don't pay bills, they sparkle, reproduce, and get applauded for breathing. I tried to laugh it off with friends, dry jokes about sponsoring my sister's honeymoon. Humor is cheaper than therapy. But every envelope with my name on it felt like another brick pressing on my ribs. Then came a dinner that should have been forgettable. We were eating spaghetti plain, because apparently Parmesan wasn't in the budget when my sister's future was. Dad leaned back, fork dangling, and said, "Did you hear about that guy from the next town?" I kept twirling pasta. "What guy?" "Delivery rider," he said. "Fell off his bike, broke his arm. Company paid him 6 figures. Mom actually laughed. Can you imagine? He got a year's salary just like that. Even my sister chuckled, belly round under her sweatshirt, for covering as if she was already spending imaginary checks. I laughed too, because what else could I do? But the sound snagged in my throat. Because for a second, I saw it. The flicker in their eyes. A glint. Like an idea had just clicked. I brushed it off. Told myself it was nothing. Just random dinner chatter. Can you imagine? 6 figures for falling off a bike. But later, lying in bed, that look replayed in my mind. I'd thought my crash earlier was just bad luck, a wobble, a truck, a fall. What if luck wasn't the point? What if they were waiting for something worse? I rolled over, pulled the blanket up to my chin, stared at the crack in the ceiling that looks like a river. My chest was tight. You're imagining it, I told myself. But deep down, I knew better. The next morning confirmed it. At breakfast, Dad tapped his spoon against his mug like a ticking clock. Then, casually, "I'll check your bike again today. Might need another cable adjustment." My toast turned to sand in my mouth. Another look. My skin prickled. I forced a smile. "Sure, Dad. Thanks for keeping me safe, one pothole at a time." Inside, I was screaming. That was the moment I realized I couldn't wait for the next crash. I needed proof. Not paranoia, not gut feelings, evidence. So after breakfast, I told them I was heading into town. They assumed for work. In reality, I went to the electronics shop. You can buy a hidden camera for less than a week's worth of tips. Sleek, small, perfect to tuck behind the paint cans in the garage. The clerk gave me a raised eyebrow when I asked how long it could record. I shrugged. Long enough. He didn't ask questions, probably thought I was catching a cheating boyfriend. If only. That night, while Mom hummed in the kitchen and Dad zoned out in front of the TV, I snuck into the garage. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the thing. I wedged the camera between the shelf and the wall, angled straight at the bike stand where Dad always crouched. Then I went back inside and pretended to laugh at whatever canned sitcom laughter filled the room. The plan was simple. Tomorrow, I'd fake a normal morning. Pretend I was leaving for work. But I wouldn't go. I'd hide the bike and wait. Morning came. I put on my uniform, slung the bag over my shoulder, and wheeled the bike out with my best casual smile. "See you tonight," I called. "Be careful on that bike," Dad said. The words hit me like lead. I pushed the bike down the street, turned a corner, and stashed it behind the library dumpster. Not glamorous, but safe. Then I sat on a bench, phone in hand, scrolling through memes I couldn't see. My brain wasn't laughing at cats in sweaters, it was counting beats, waiting. I killed time. Walked loops in the park. Bought a coffee I didn't taste. Pretended to read in the library while every word blurred. All I could think about was the garage, the shelf, the camera. My dad's hands. By the time I finally walked home, my legs felt like overstretched rubber bands. Mom was at the sink, humming. Dad was nowhere in sight. "Back early?" she asked, surprised. "Short shift?" I forced a smile, lied, and escaped upstairs. I waited. Listened. Their routine settled in, the TV buzz, the clink of dishes. My chance. I crept down the hall, every floorboard groaning under me. At the garage door, I froze, ears straining. Silence. Inside, the air was thick with dust and oil. My bike leaned against the stand, innocent as always. I crouched at the shelf, hands trembling, and pulled the camera free. Footsteps overhead, I froze, breath shallow. They passed. I shoved the device under my sweater and bolted upstairs. In my room, I locked the door, yanked open my laptop, and plugged it in. One video file. I clicked. The garage appeared, grainy, still. Minutes of nothing. Then movement. Dad. Toolbox in hand, whistling. He crouched by the bike. My throat tightened. He reached for the brake cables. Tools clinked. Loosen. Adjust. Loosen again. Not fixing, breaking. Then Mom stepped into frame, arms folded. She leaned close, whispered. I turned up the volume. Not too much, she said. Just enough. Just enough. My whole body went cold. Dad tugged the cable again, stood back, satisfied. He wiped his hands on a rag, glanced at the doorway, and walked out. I slammed the laptop shut, heart pounding, chest heaving. It wasn't bad luck. It wasn't me. It was them. My parents. You'd think that after catching my dad on camera tampering with my bike, I'd scream, cry, or at least throw something. But no. I just sat there in my room, laptop humming on the desk, hands trembling like I'd downed 6 espressos on an empty stomach. The people who used to nag me about helmets, who told me to check both ways before crossing the street, they'd been deliberately setting me up. Not once, not twice, over and over again. I shut the laptop, shoved it under my bed like it was radioactive, and sat frozen. That's when the thought slammed into me. What do you even do when your own parents want to hurt you? Not kill me, I reminded myself, as if that made it any better. Just injure me. Just enough for a payout. What a comfort. My first instinct? Tell someone. But who? Friends would call me dramatic. Teachers? I wasn't even in school anymore. Neighbors? Too awkward. That left one option, the one I'd been dreading. The police. The idea of walking into a station with a shaky little SD card and saying, "Hey, my parents are trying to injure me for insurance money," sounded like the punchline of a bad joke. But the alternative, pretending everything was fine, was worse. Pretending doesn't keep you alive. So, I went. The station smelled like stale coffee and damp carpet. The board officer at the front desk perked up when I said, "I need to report my parents." For what, he asked, pen clicking. For trying to make me crash at work. I have video proof. That got his attention. Minutes later, I was in a bland interview room, plastic chairs, buzzing fluorescent light. I told them everything, the crashes, the close calls, the weird dinner conversations. Then I handed over the footage. The officer watched maybe 10 seconds before his posture shifted. Suddenly, I wasn't just some kid wasting his time. "You did the right thing," he said. "We'll take it from here." I nodded, but his reassurance didn't make me feel safe. Not when the people I feared were the same ones who tucked me in at night. They didn't send me home, thank God. Instead, they called my aunt, the one who smelled like peppermint tea and always gave me books for Christmas. She picked me up, hugged me tighter than anyone had in months, and said, "You're staying with me now." Her spare room had mismatched sheets and a kitten poster left over from her daughter. It was the coziest bed I'd ever slept in. But even wrapped in pink and yellow blankets, I couldn't relax. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing, missed calls, voicemails, texts. I ignored them all. Except one. Mom's voice on the voicemail was sharp, furious. "How could you? You don't know what you've done." I tossed the phone onto the pillow like it was on fire. My aunt walked in, frowned at the screen, and said, "Block them." "I can't," I whispered. And I meant it. Blocking them felt too final, like admitting they weren't my parents anymore. The next day, the police called. My parents had been arrested, questioned, released. I wasn't surprised. That's how the system works. Paperwork, bail, back out again. Which meant the calls kept coming. Then one night, my aunt's phone rang. She snapped at whoever was on the line, then peeked into my room. They want to talk to you. Just for a minute. Video call. Every cell in my body screamed no. But another part of me, the part craving answers, nodded. We set up the laptop at the kitchen table. My aunt stood nearby, arms crossed. The screen blinked, and there they were. My parents. They didn't look sorry. They looked angry. You have no idea what you've done, Dad started. I think I do, I said, my throat dry. Mom leaned forward. We weren't trying to kill you. Don't be ridiculous. Oh, so that makes it fine? I laughed, hollow and sharp. It was just supposed to be a small accident, Dad snapped. A broken bone, something that heals. One payout could have changed everything. My chest turned cold. For who? For you? For all of us. Mom shot back. You'd have money for college. Your sister could start her life. We could finally breathe. My fists curled. So my safety was worth what? A house deposit? A wedding dress? She's pregnant, Mom's voice cracked. She needs us. She needs stability. And you, what do you have? A job on a bike. You could have had millions, just like that man in the next town. You wouldn't have even noticed a broken arm in the long run. I laughed again, bitter this time. You wanted me in a hospital bed so she could have flowers at her wedding. You wanted me bleeding so she could have a house. Dad's face darkened. You're ungrateful. We did this for you too. You'd never make money on your own. This was your chance. And there it was. The ugly truth laid bare. I leaned toward the screen, voice steady as stone. You weren't doing this for me. You risked my life because she mattered more than I ever did. You never thought about me. Only her. And now, you've lost both of us. Mom's mouth opened, but my aunt slammed the laptop shut. Silence. My hands trembled against the table, but for the first time in months, I could breathe. Closure isn't neat. It doesn't wrap itself in bows. I knew it wasn't really over, there'd be hearings, trials, long roads ahead. But for once, the weight wasn't on me. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. The trial came quickly. The footage spoke louder than anything I could have said. My parents were convicted, reckless endangerment, child cruelty, conspiracy to commit fraud. For years in prison. Restitution ordered. Not the millions they dreamed of, just enough to sting. They had to sell the house. Their precious family home turned into a payout for the daughter they tried to sacrifice. The irony wasn't lost on me. My sister found out during the trial. She was horrified. She cut ties too. No wedding, no dream house, no miracle future. Just a cramped rental with her boyfriend and baby. She still sends me pictures of my niece, but never mentions our parents. Not anymore. A year later, here I am. I stayed with my aunt until this week, when I finally moved into my dorm. Tuition and rent covered by restitution money. For the first time ever, I'm building something that belongs only to me. No bike repairs. No golden child. No strings attached. Just me. Sometimes, I still wake in the night to the sound of brakes failing. But then I glance around my tiny dorm room and smile. Because I survived. They thought they could buy my sister's future with my pain. Instead, I bought my own. So tell me, did I go too far, or not far enough? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe.